Okay, good day, everybody. It's obviously the most challenging time. It's lunchtime, so I can see everybody's, but it's probably the best time to introduce you something really disruptive. You will be able to swallow it. So I wanted to introduce to you JEDI. JEDI is something which is coming from an environment that you all know, but you sometimes stay very far away from it, which is the state, which is the government. So what is JEDI? JEDI is basically coming out of that conclusion. You know this slide, the 10 largest companies in the world. It has a couple of weeks delay. I mean, now Google is approaching and Apple are approaching the $1,000 billion mark for valuation. And from a European perspective, this is very worrying. 10 largest companies in the world, 8 are American, 2 are Chinese, 9 out of 10 are technology firms. So this gets us very excited. And I say us because until a couple of months ago, I was one of yours. I set up a few companies and I run several private equity funds in the last 15 years. I joined the government in May. As you know, in France, we have a new president, Emmanuel Macron. And this gets us very worried. And why does it get us very worried? Because innovation, more and more, will fuel the growth, the jobs, and probably also the sovereignty, the way that we can really defend our system, our values. And you know the traditional curve of adoption with early adopters, etc. And as you all know, probably in this room, this is accelerating. There's a kind of winner takes all. So if you are not in a lead position for innovation, if you are not the first mover, if you're not able to scale very, very quickly, well, the risk is that you have all these mega platforms, we call that GAFA or BATS in Asia, that will reap most of the profit. And interestingly, you probably also know that these platforms are all reinvesting their money into moonshot projects, or at least many of them. So this is key. If Europe wants to defend its economic growth, its prosperity, but you probably saw also in the latest elections how much that can influence also on our democratic system. Only think about how cyber is now has a huge influence and potentially disrupting influence on electoral processes. Obviously, this is key beyond the economic part of it. And I also want to debunk a real myth that, especially the US, for example, is only driven by private enterprise. I mean, we will all want to believe in it. But as is very clear here, I mean, we would probably not be in this room if there was not the US government who created ARPANET, which became the internet in the 60s and the 70s. GPS, SpaceX, the rockets that Elon Musk is using is a program which is funded both by NASA and by DARPA. Drones, Siri, for all of you who have an iPhone with you, you know Siri is actually a shortcut for Stanford Research Institute, a program financed by DARPA. And DARPA is this research agency that was set up in the 50s when the Russians launched Sputnik, and suddenly the US realized, my goodness, we are losing our technological edge. We are not anymore potentially leaders. It has economic, but obviously also sovereignty consequences. So this is why we have created JEDI. So JEDI is in short for Joint European, because it's a program that we are launching on a French-German base, but it has a European perspective. The D is not for defense, like in DARPA, it's disruptive, and it's an initiative because we don't want, at all costs, to create a new bureaucracy. We are pretty good at bureaucracies in Europe. What will be JEDI? JEDI is not going to innovate. It won't have labs, research centers. JEDI is a new way of financing disruptive innovation. So it's going to finance all those, the startups, the mid-caps, the large technology groups, the research centers, and it's only going to fund projects which, paradoxically, have absolutely no return on investment perspective. We don't want to interfere and compete with VCs or with public investment banks that we have in France and Germany. We really want only to focus on the project that nobody else is doing because it's too risky or because it's too long term, it goes beyond the 5 years on which either companies or VCs are incentivized to invest. It's going to be extremely fast in its decision. Today, when you fund innovation, it's long processes and then you are left alone for 3 years. We want to do it completely opposite. We want to be able to take decisions to fund research projects in a couple of days or in a couple of weeks maximum, and in no way months. But then we are going to be extremely demanding. Is it really pushing technological frontiers? Is it achieving results? And third component, is it achieving a prototype? We don't want any more research that is focused on publishing papers. This is very good. But here, this is very complementary. We want things that work immediately. It's not a V0, it's not going to a beta version, it's going to be the real version. We are going to be able to kill projects almost from one day to another if we feel that it's not really pushing the limits as we want to do. It's going to be focused. We're not going to finance everything. We're going to finance 10, 15, 20 projects. DARPA today is financing around 50 or 60 projects, large projects, every year, with budgets going from $1 to $200 million per project. And this with extremely lean structure with only two layers. Basically, there's the boss of DARPA and 150 people working for it. And finally, it's going to be extremely independent. And we have been able, from a French side or a German side, to make sure that there are going to be no political interference for money that will come 100% from the state. Last but not least, obviously the themes that we're going to address. We're going to address themes in AI, in cyber, but we're also going to go beyond the digital space. We're going to look at genomics. We're going to look at the future of storage. And again, the idea is not to recreate a Google, an Amazon, or an Alibaba. This would be just catching up. The idea here is that we regain leadership and that we invent the future. So why do I present that to you today? Because we want to build that with the ecosystem. We want you guys to present us projects where probably VCs or other financing institutions would not finance because it's obviously too risky. We want research centers or teams that have really disruptive ideas to come to us. So the objective is to have this initiative up and running. We are aiming at the 300 million euro budget for 2018 as soon as January 2018. So we need you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now let's talk a little bit about this. Maybe you sit there. So 300 million, and the money is coming from the French government, from Brussels, or half Germany, half France?
Okay, it's obviously being constructed, and it's going to be coming from France, from Germany, and hopefully also we are going to have a European layer to it. And what we have been able to decide is that there will be not the typical, we call that in French, loi du juste retour. You put 30% of the projects need to come back to France or to Germany. Here we're going to be driven only by excellency, which from a political point of view is very sensitive. Because you may end up with the French government paying 50% of that and maybe only 20% of the project finance in France. But this is, I mean, we have a new president who wants to do things differently.
He's a digital guy, I know him.
And this will be hopefully something to show it.
And is it a venture capital alternative? Is it additional? No. Is it for the ones which got rejected? Because like we know from our flying cars later, Volocopter and Lilium, which is a big highlight of today in the evening. Yeah. Is it for projects which are too far away from the money for VCs?
I mean, it's the obsession we have is that we should not be redundant with something existing. I've been fighting personally against that. I was always very annoyed when I saw public investment funds doing the job of VCs. Obviously, for an entrepreneur, having sometimes public money is very interesting because it gives you leverage with your banks, with your clients, etc. But I think it's a distortion of the market. In this case, we will only look for projects which are too long-term and too risky, and we will have zero return on investment perspective, because if you have a return on investment perspective, you will have a bias towards the projects which are less risky.
Yes.
Here we really want to push the technology frontier.
So if you look at venture capital, it's changed a lot over the last 20 years. I think there are like minimum revenue targets. You have to have 5 million as a startup before you even invest.
Sure.
It sounds like you're trying to get back the true venture capital for risk takers.
Well, if that spirit can be taken, I mean, I'm amazed to see that today people who are investing in moonshot projects, because that is really what we're going to do, are either DARPA in the US or actually DARPA has been reproduced as a model with energy, with intelligence, or the large platforms who have so many. I mean, you look at the margins that Facebook just announced. All this money from Jeff Bezos, from Mark Zuckerberg, from Google, especially with Google X, is reinvested. So what we are worried, but what we want to, not just to be on the defensive side, but on the offensive side in Europe, is to say we should not leave the capacity to invent the future beyond 5 years, either to American platforms or to states which are more authoritarian, like in Asia, and who have this capacity of thinking long term. I think it's great for them, but you know, we must be able in our democracies where we are so short-term oriented with a political point of view, but also from a return perspective. I don't know any investor who seriously tells me I invest on something which is not going to give returns at least in the next 5 or 7 years. I mean, those who are like that...
The Israel government is like that.
Exactly. And
they give forgivable loans. In fact, I spent a lot of time in Brussels last year. Mm-hmm. And it was a horrific experience because I finally saw where the money goes, who's managing it, and how careless they are.
I mean, that bad. It's not that bad, but it's true that today...
Well, I met a person from the SME instrument. Mm-hmm. He was running it, and we were talking, and I said, okay, who are your 2 most successful companies you were backing? And he didn't even remember the names. So yeah. I think there's a lot to be done from people like you.
No, absolutely. I mean, to give a bit of credit, the new commissioner for research, I mean, he's now for a couple of years, Carlos Moedas. He's young, he's coming from the ecosystem. He wants to change it. One of his things that shocked him, he told me, was that when you have a Horizon 2020 grant, you don't even see the project owner. There's no pitching.
Why is that?
Well, I think it's a very bureaucratic way of seeing...
But why do we have still bureaucracy when we are losing against the US? And Asia, you were
But we are all responsible. You know, Europe is us. It's the German government, it's the French government, it's still the British government. We still hope it will remain. And I think we did not really think through what it means.
And everyone is saying it's too complicated. We were asked a year ago to participate with our NOAH Connect in a competition for like some European digital project. It was the most horrific experience I went through in my life. They sent us questionnaires like this, like 20 times, a tax audit basically. And you know, you completely lose any interest to play. So do you see your job also to take some of this red tape away we have built?
Well, the best way, you know, to change things is not to attack.
To create new.
Is to create something new that will show results and that will show that we will try to have a level playing field. Today, a lot of the research grants or innovation grants are going to large platforms because they have the time to fill these forms. We will do exactly like a startup competition, but again, not to startups. We're not going to take stakes. We're going to fund innovation projects. And
where do you fund them? At universities?
We're going to fund the 3 pockets, actually, who are doing innovation. Research centers and universities, that's one big pocket. The whole SME, startup, and innovative ecosystem, and the large technology platforms. And today what we see is that for the smaller players, it's extremely complicated to get to research grants because it's a lengthy process and you cannot allocate one person for whole months just to fill that up. Here we want to put them in the center, present to a board which will be composed of people from the ecosystem that will be named by the government because the government is going to fund that. But once they're named, it's a little bit like the justice system. They cannot be removed.
André, is this your full-time job, running this JD?
As I mentioned to you, I was an investor until May. Between May...
Because you don't seem like a politician to
me. No. I spent the last 4 months as the main chief advisor of the Minister of Defense. This is where we started this idea. and I quit in order to pull that up. And people are always a bit surprised because the goal we give to us is 31st of December 2017, this flies. And for the moment, we are
super early. You're just starting, right? Really, right?
We are starting.
Because there was no website. I tried to do some research.
There's no website.
It's the first time you speak about this publicly.
It's the first time we speak about it, and it's very important.
At lunch.
Well, you know,
but they're all coming back because we have number 26 coming up. You know number 26?
No.
It's a great German fintech company.
Okay.
Now, I'm great in complaining because a lot of people complain also about our female ratio. Mm-hmm. So rather than complaining, how can NOAH help you and help Europe? Because you know what our slogan is?
Connected leaders.
Connected leaders.
I got that right.
Okay, it's half of the equation. We connect leaders to support the European digital ecosystem.
Okay.
So when your office reached out to us, how could I not squeeze you in at the very last minute?
No, thank you very much.
Because I said, it's exactly what you do, is our mantra. But what can we do concretely for you? Should we install like a submit business plan button on the website at NOAH? What do you would like to see us to do?
I think, you know, what we are presenting is completely the opposite what most people in ministries think. And again, I saw that from the inside in the last 4 months. There's a lot of good faith. I don't think bureaucracy is here to hinder us in creating. It's just that we don't probably have less revolving doors between the US compared to the US. People are less going from government to the private sector and coming back. What is great with our
maybe we should initiate that, right?
We should initiate that. What you could help us is in Berlin, in Munich, in all the hubs, digital hubs in Germany, but also in Europe, is make sure that this initiative is not coming from top down, but that it's co-created with the ecosystem. We have a few values, being extremely fast, focused on disruption and not on incremental. A lot of people are doing that and do that pretty well. And the fact that it's really here not to catch up, but really to leapfrog and to be back on the leadership.
I think
so you need to help us make this idea popular, especially the coalition is being negotiated in Germany. So we need to have that in. We need to talk to politicians. We need to talk to investors.
You know what I told your colleagues when they were asking if you come on stage? I said, yes, if you bring us Macron to Berlin, if you bring you potentially Merkel, and you can talk about the future of Europe. My view on the political system is it's completely broken. You scare off everyone to fill out these massive forms. Mm-hmm. I think the massive forms are there because the people who are going to make the decision are government employed people, and they are scared to be criticized, so they want to do everything times 10 in order to cover their, asses. So you should change to a crowdsourced funding. You should use the government money and ask the community, the ecosystem, which is completely possible with today's technology, like the way our startups on the startup stage, the 90s, get voted to #1 Lalafo from Ukraine, through the people who know, not the people who are under pressure to, in future, get criticized for the wrong decisions. That's my view. We have to rethink the way we distribute the funds to the people who really deserve it, not the ones who go through the paper tiger exercise.
Sure, but what you need to understand is that I think the state has a role to play because these technology bricks, I will give you some very concrete example. Drones without GPS. That means using drones within buildings in areas where a GPS signal is not coming. This is today a frontier that nobody has really solved. Autonomous driving is still hindering on recognition of traffic lights, so that's why you don't see them that many in inner cities, but that's probably where the application. These are the frontiers that we're going to try to tackle, and when you talk with large companies or with startups, they all tell you, we would love to work on that, but this frontier is way too far from a go-to-market perspective. And so what we're trying to instill is to say the state here has a role to play, but where the European states have always been very bad, at once they got involved, you know, they stayed inside, and then they wanted to develop the product and to have a stake in the company. Exactly. What we need here to do is to have the state develop these bricks and then make sure that the IP and the translation into commercial applications is made by the ecosystem. That's why we also need to co-create that.
So venture capitalists, they love to showcase their success stories, and we have Early Bird with number 26 coming up in a sec. The governments, how much you spend per year on the digital sector? I think Horizon 2020 is...
Horizon 2020 is a gigantic program.
How big is it in billions?
It's close to 10 billion euro per year.
Okay, and then there's the SME instrument, and there are more. So you spend per year 10, 20 billion on the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Can you name the one most successful company we backed?
Here, Marco, you are putting me a little bit in a difficult position. I'm not here to speak about Horizon 2020.
No, of course, but you see in the press, no one from the government, from Brussels, get associated to the companies, so there's no link.
There's something?
I think if you do more publicity about the good stuff we're doing in Brussels, I think there would be more interest in working with Brussels.
What is interesting is that DARPA has been extremely good. Everybody knows about the story of DARPANet, of the GPS, of autonomous vehicles, of Siri, the ones I mentioned to you. And they have been able, even if it's a defense agency doing a lot of, you know, lethal weapon developing, which we will not do, it's interesting to see that they have been very good at communicating. The second thing, when you look at Google X, you have a large chunk of a proportion of the employees who come from DARPA. So DARPA has been also a bed, kind of a career accelerator for people coming from research labs. They go to DARPA because that's where the government gives them the opportunity to change the world. And I think this interaction we need to rebuild, because today, when you look at all the talent that we have in Europe, I don't know if you know that proportion. I'm a big fan of Facebook, but when you look at Facebook AI Research Fair, 120 people approximately, a third of them are French people. So we paid them, we educated them, and now they make Mark Zuckerberg even more richer. So it's not about, I mean, I'm a liberal person, and we are in a liberal system, but we need to give these Europeans, these Germans, these French, these Brits, who are leaving for the US, and some are leaving for Asia, the opportunity to do moonshot projects also in Europe. And when you talk to some of them, they are very excited about what we are preparing. We just need to keep it completely unbureaucratic, and I tell you, on that one, I need all of you and all the good lobbying possible.
So are you going to stay for Lilium and Volocopter?
Of course.
NOAH offers you help, whatever you want. Please don't understand my harsh words as negative. I have been spending a lot of time on the topic, and I got frustrated, and then your initiative came. I said, something new, and I like very much the idea behind it.
Thank you.
And we are here to help you.
Thank you
so
very much,
André.
Marco. It's a great pleasure.
Thank you.